No, Sarah, you are also through to the next line. Doesn't matter what you score. What are you going to go? This board's all yours, and if you want to get in all our
I'll just encourage members to mute their microphones, please. Thank you.
Mr. Whittle.
Welcome everyone to this meeting of Caerphilly Council's Partnership Scrutiny Committee, held via Microsoft Teams today, the 27th of January 2022. Going on to our agenda. Item 1 of our agenda is to receive any apologies for absence. I've had an apology from Councillor Sean Morgan. Are we aware of any other apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Aldworth, Councillor Chris Forehead, Councillor Elaine Forehead as well, and Lowry Jones as well.
Could I apologise as well, Chair? If I have to leave the meeting, I did mention it to you at the start of the meeting. It's Roy Sir Alice. I might have to dash off. Okay.
Yes.
My wife.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know, Councillor Sir Alice.
Right.
Chair, I may need to leave around about 7. I'm not sure. But
let's hope we don't get there. But yes,
well,
thank you for letting us know.
Just in case we do.
Thank
you,
fingers
crossed, not. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Keep Mike quiet then, please, Chair. Only allow him to speak once.
Hopefully people won't speak many times as they did yesterday evening at council. Okay, let's go to item 2 on our agenda, which is
Chair, did you want me to do a roll call?
I'm terribly sorry, I missed that. Yes, please, Kath. Should we have a roll call?
Okay, members, when I call out your name, can you just confirm you're in attendance, please? Councillor Adams.
I'm in attendance until about 7:30.
Councillor Cass.
10. Yeah, I'm here.
Councillor Harding.
Present.
Councillor Johnston.
Present, and thank you, Kath, for the link.
No problem. Councillor Kirby.
Present.
Councillor Mann.
Yeah, Kath.
Councillor Miles.
Present.
Councillor Sir Alice.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
I'm not present.
Councillor Whittle.
I'm not present.
And Councillor Hussey.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Item 2 then on our agenda is declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interests in respect of any item of business in this agenda, in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution, and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Are there any declarations of interest? None? Okay, thank you. Item 3 of our agenda is to approve the minutes of the Partnership Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 15th of July 2021. They're at pages 1 to 6 of our pack, so I'll go through them page to page for accuracy. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Can members who attended that meeting please move and second the minutes as a true record?
Move.
Who's moved?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Is there a second?
Adams, the second.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. We should go to the vote now using Microsoft Forms. Thank you. Please vote. Any member who has a problem voting, please let me know. No problem.
I abstain because I don't believe I was at that meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Same applies to me, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sir Alice.
That's moved by the majority, Chair.
Moved by the majority. Thank you, Kath. On to item 4 then of our agenda, Partnership Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Programme. Kath, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to identify to members the next meeting of the Partnership Scrutiny Committee will be on the 21st of July 2022. On Appendix 1 of the report, you'll see we've got the update on the wellbeing assessment and response analysis for the wellbeing plan. could I just identify to members, obviously there are a few areas of the plan, the existing Caerphilly plan, that you haven't done an in detail report on. If I just list those areas, and maybe you want to bring forward one of those or two of those to the July meeting. We have from the original plan, assets, procurement, communications and engagement. And we've got the two new areas that were approved at the last meeting of the Partnership Scrutiny Committee, which was jobs growth and employability support and Caerphilly Cares. So I don't know if there's any support for any of those items to come to July.
Thank you, Kath. Councillor Johnston, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I can't guarantee I'll be there at the meeting because we don't know the election outcome. But I would say the jobs and growth and that there seems to me would be of interest. No, especially when we were discussing the city deal last night, and one saying that there's no growth in that there. So let's look for ourselves, isn't it?
And that's a proposal from you, Councillor Johnston, which I
Yeah.
would support. Any other member have any views, please?
Happy with that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry.
Mann.
Councillor Mann. Yes. No one else want to have a say on that?
Okay,
So-
Chair, I can add that to the work programme for July then.
That would be welcome. Thank you, Kath. Is there
Somebody
a
move and
mover?
second it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, is there a mover and a seconder for the forward work programme as just agreed?
Yeah, move, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Seconded,
Second.
please. Who seconded?
Carl.
Thank you, Councillor Cuss. Let's have a vote on the forward work programme, please. Thank you. Again, if any members having a problem with forms, please let me know.
Chair, it's Councillor Ezzy here, because I'm on the outside body, I won't be voting on anything tonight. Okay, thanks.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Hussey.
That's moved, Chair.
That's carried. Yep, good. Thank you, Kath. On to item 5 on our agenda now, which is Best Start in Life. And Sarah Mudge, the Early Years and Partnerships Manager, hi Sarah, is going to introduce this for us. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me here tonight to show you my presentation and the progress that we've made to date. So I'll run the presentation and then talk you through it. So I'm the lead for the Best Start in Life in my role as the Early Years and Partnerships Manager, and Measurable Bowley from Public Health Wales was our champion on the Public Service Board. Obviously, Mayor's at the moment is working very heavily leading on the vaccination programme for Gwent, and so I'm here presenting this tonight. So in the Action Area 1, Best Start in Life, we wanted to develop a whole systems approach. And that means looking at the whole of the early years services, the whole system, to ensure every child had the best start in life, where children is at the centre of excellent integrated services that puts their needs first. And the biggest, hardest part is regardless of traditional organisational or professional structures, because we all have organisational priorities, and actually to put children at the centre meant we have to challenge ourselves as organisations. Okay, so we have a steering group that is a Gwent steering group, and we have leads and coordinators from across many partners. So we've got a Nairn Bevan University Health Board, health visiting and midwifery partners sit around the table, Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly, Monmouthshire, Newport, Public Health Wales and Torfaen. The 3 pathfinders initially was Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly and Newport, and Monmouthshire and Torfaen have joined us this year, although they've sat on the steering group, so they've come on the journey with us. So what is the system? Well, if we all work separately in our silos, we don't see the whole picture. So it means we don't really get a full view over what that needs to look, what the system looks like. And when we talk about the early years system, we are talking about everything from midwifery, schools, childcare, health visiting, school nurses, family workers, family support, voluntary sector organisations, community centres, community buildings. And actually it is shocking how many people are involved in the early years system. And actually this whole project was around working in partnership to collaborate, to come together, to develop our model of an integrated team working together towards shared outcomes with the children at the heart, the families at the centre, and actually looking at how we put that support into the communities for the community so they don't become reliant on us as services. It was totally looking at how early can we get in to support families in that early intervention prevention model. And it looking at our needs basis, because what we don't want is just to give the same to everybody, because some families need more support than other families who are very resilient. And what we don't want, we've seen a lot in COVID about our communities becoming very resilient, and we didn't want to disempower them during, we want to build on that sort of social capital then. So what did we do? We used a system called Vanguard Systems Thinking, where we literally looked at the whole lot, and we took senior managers on the journey with us to look at everything in the system, all the stuff. We looked at all our professional views, all those stakeholders that said, these are the issues, these are the barriers and constraints, things like flying start postcodes, how they become an issue where families in need live outside of those areas. And then actually we sat down with families, and I say we had mayors, voluntary sector, senior managers, chief execs, all sat down with families in their homes. This was pre-COVID, and they told us what they thought of the system. And actually what that did was make us re-look at the system, is where's the bureaucracy, the wastage, where's the duplication in the system? How many times do we ask them to fill in a bit of paper? And we looked at our assumptions, because sometimes we set things up with particular applications, particular forms, particular processes on the basis that it would make it better. But actually our assumptions are wrong. So we looked at a new purpose, new principles for the design and delivery. We checked it back with the families and the stakeholders, and then we were due to test in April 2020, but of course the world changed slightly at that point. And we actually put the pilot on hold temporarily while we responded to COVID, in fairness, because it involves health visiting, midwifery and early intervention teams. There was a response needed to COVID. But by May, which actually wasn't that long, we decided this was too important and it had to continue. So by October, we were testing the pilot, and initially we tested it in the New Tredegar area. So we looked at the 5 communities of New Tredegar. Phillipstown was a Flying Start area. The 4 other communities sat outside of Flying Start, but equally there were families in there that really, really needed our support. And during 2020, we were also looking at how we commission services, because from April 2021, Families First and Flying Start had to recommission services. So what we also used was all the learning around how we shape and commission that system. So the purpose, what's our purpose? Is to work alongside all families to ensure their child has the best start in life, taking into account what matters to the family, and accessing support if and when they need it. Not all families need our support, and not all families need us to interfere, but some families do need help, and they do need it when they need it. And what we don't want is waiting lists and long times to access support. But we also knew it had to be sustainable. There wasn't a lot of money down the back of the couch, so we had to make a sustainable system in an integrated model where we all came together. There's a lot of money goes into early years, and by using it effectively, using staff effectively, we can meet the family's needs at the right time, in the right place, by the right person. And these are the principles and values. You know, we know family had to be at the centre of it. They know what they need. They have to have ownership. It's not about us doing to the family. It's about us building that relationship with the family, so they trust us and they can tell us what really is going on and where the root causes are that we can help them to tackle. And what we didn't want to do was create just a menu of provision, because that's no good to a family either. If they've got trouble and they need support, what they don't want is just being given a parenting programme of this or that or the other. What they need is to look at what's actually the support that they need, and us to shape our support so it meets their needs. And what we wanted was not necessarily universal access, everybody having the same access to everything, but actually equity in access. So access support should be universally available, but actually designing for what matters to the family, actually looking at what that family actually needs, as opposed to just giving them an offer. And we had strengths of communities and strengths in staff. What was very interesting was talking to families. When they told us what was really important, the health visitor would say, don't tell them that, I'm not supposed to do that, that's not part of my job. But actually they did what mattered to that family, and they supported the family with what mattered, despite the system, not because of the system. So we had to use that experience to say we need to shape it and give some more autonomy to our staff who have the skills, who are excellent, but maybe stop doing things because the system makes them stop. Help families make informed choices and keeping families safe and healthy. We can't just give everybody what they want. We have to look at what's needed. So we do need to think about safeguarding. We do need to think about the child's needs. Just because a family might want to have their child in a day nursery from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. If they're working and that's what they need, that's different. If they're not working and actually they just want them out of the house, then we need to look at what relationship have you got with your child? How can we support that relationship? We also wanted to look at record keeping and actually sharing records, preventing duplication. There's so many assessments, so many referrals, and actually maybe that got in the way. Listening and understanding what mattered to family and really hearing families as opposed to making assumptions over what we think they need. And also letting them contact us how they needed to. So texting, families know that we're not there 24/7, that we're not there on a weekend. But if they've been trying to achieve a skill with their child and it happens on a Saturday, they want to tell us about that wow moment. And they know that when we come back to work on a Monday, we'll give them a text back or we'll pick up that phone and give them a ring and say, well done. And actually it's about sharing those wow moments. So we did a lot of shaping in 2020, as well as responding to COVID. We actually recommissioned Flying Start and Families First. We brought a lot of our joint contracts together and we designed an early intervention, early years team within Caerphilly County Borough Council. So Families First funds into our early years pot to be able to allow early intervention to work across the entire borough to meet the needs of families. It doesn't mean that everybody gets free childcare, but it does mean that we can flex some of the support that we offer so that if a child has developmental delays, there's some placement available to be able to identify what their needs are moving into school. And we also looked at our early years integration transformation pilots and how that was working to kind of shape our approach, learning from the pilots. It was very much a live environment. And we did the first 6-month review in March last year. And then we started doing the 12-month review now at Christmas. So it's about that live learning environment as to what works, what doesn't work, how do we need to change things, how do staff and families change what we deliver. So what have we done? Well, we've made a single point of contact instead of multiple referrals into early years and multiple ways of doing it, different referral forms. There's a single referral form. It's a request for support, because if we do a referral form, families get handed over to us. Whereas a request for support, we work alongside whoever's got that key relationship, a health visitor, a midwife, a school nurse, the school, the childcare, because they have a key relationship to that family and they are the key contact, and we work alongside them. The What Matters conversation has been a game changer. It's about everybody understanding that it's important to take time to build relationships, to have a conversation, for families to trust us, to tell us really what matters to them. And part of that is a challenge around communication between teams. We need to build relationships. So we've actually recently been zoning the teams into north, south and east. So that's been a big thing, bringing health visitors and local authority staff all together. We're looking at a hub in the east as well to bring Garvo teams closer to us too. So it's about how we deliver these co-located teams, integrated teams, but it's more than just putting them all in the same building. We actually have to allow time for those relationships and create opportunities for those relationships to happen and the systems to support that communication. And then we've looked at, well, our support system is very different. Actually, in COVID, we've learned that some families work very well in that virtual environment. They like to be able to go online any time of day or night, whatever suits them, and find that information out. So it's about accessible information, quality information that they can rely on, or they want it. Some families need that in person. So we've developed clean spaces in community centres, in community buildings, right the way around the borough. And some families really need that support in the home because they can't yet come out of the home. We've got a lot of families that have got a lot of issues going on and really, really struggle to access that support in their community. So sometimes we have to go into the home. So even during COVID, we've been doing that as well, but it's about a needs basis. It's not just an automatic default to doing it in the home, maybe like we would have done years ago. And that's made us far more effective. So we've got the single request for support form. We've changed practice in that. We've got an early years website, which is not quite there yet, but nearly. It's not far off. We're getting all the Welsh translation done now. As far as our Caerphilly staff have gone, we've developed that single child record, and we have got some Aneurin Bevan staff onto that system to start looking at those records and being able to share information between. But that is still a challenge for us. A single electronic child record is our ultimate aim. And we started zoning those teams in the multi-agency basis to improve that collaboration. But change in practice hasn't been easy. So we still have challenges. We've got workforce capacity issues, health visiting, midwifery. They're absolutely critical to develop of this, to implementation of this model. But we do have vacancies. Recruitment is a challenge. There are only so many students that come out and qualify every September. And retaining those staff in our teams is hard at the moment. So we're understanding about that health visiting midwifery workforce and the pressures that they're under working in COVID conditions. But it is an area we do need. It's a challenge, but it's an area we do need to focus on. The electronic sharing of records, we have been working with Aneurin Bevan and our own IT system to try and bring Aneurin Bevan IT capacity into our CCBC bases. We've been doing this now for 2 years and it is exceptionally difficult. But I'm chasing that again because it's an absolute game changer. We have to have that capacity if we're really going to co-locate. The other area that we're looking at is a single electronic system. WICIS is currently used by social services, and we're looking at how we bring health onto that WICIS system and also how we use it in education. So we're sharing across social services, education and health. That'll be, again, a game changer, but that's probably going to take us 2 years to do. The communication within the teams and having a shared language, a common understanding, again, tricky, but we need to make sure it's an absolute critical aspect that when we're using a word, we mean the same thing. Because when we're talking about different organisations, that's a tricky thing. And I don't think we can underestimate the impact of COVID. We've all been working from home, having to do social distancing. So sharing bases is really hard. And a lot of the virtual work means even some of the assessment has been done virtually, and that's not good. We need eyes on our children. So the data. What we do know is that some of the needs of our families have changed in the last 6 months. They've increased. And I would say over the last year, we've definitely seen an increase. I'm quite grateful that our contracts have been changed to go borough-wide because we are seeing a massive need coming in for that early intervention around child development, speech and language, parenting, anxiety. There's a lot of need out there. Currently, and this is a live data, we have 1,090 children that we're actively supporting across the borough, and that's not childcare placements, that's on top of. We've got a lot of children in childcare as well. But as you can see, the team in Nutridiga is working very, very hard to look at what matters conversations, to look at how we safeguard children, but there is a slight increase in need across the whole patch. Next steps is huge. We're ambitious. So we need to look at our strategy now. We need to look at an integrated workforce development plan and a communication plan so we can make sure our information is accessible for families and for staff. Shared outcomes framework and a database so that we know if we're actually making a difference, and also how we reignite and restart our community provision, because some of the community provision went on stop during the pandemic, and it's about how we bring that those community groups back to in person. They've been there virtually, but now we need to bring those groups back into physical premises. It's also about how we look at the core offer and how we expand the teams delivering that and expand it to the south of the borough as well as doing the north. And then about whether we are making a difference and whether we have changed the system moving forward. The families love it. So that's good. The feedback we're getting from families is really good, but we do need to develop better data to capture that impact on a population level. And if we get it right, we can really make substantive changes for families. So in conclusion, we have made positive distance. We've got a single point of contact. We are bringing multi-agency teams together. We're improving that relationship and there is some initial impact for families, but there is an awful lot still to do. We need to make sure that we continue that journey towards integration, true integration of all the teams. The measurable outcomes is important. Having that shared family record is important. And actually improving relationships and communication through teams and in communities with families. And that way we'll make our seamless journey for families throughout the early years. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a really impressive presentation and really, really positive. And I'm really, really excited about the work you've been doing. And yes, there's always going to be more to do. What a great start, it sounds to me. I'm really, really impressed.
Thank you.
I know I've got a couple of members who've got some questions from the report, so I'll call them first, but hopefully we'll have some further discussion. I think Councillor Mann had a query on paragraph 2.4 in the report on page 15. Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation, Sarah. You've covered a lot of stuff in that in that time. But on 2.4, it's on about a single point of contact, which is great. But it talks about ICT there, and bearing in mind the ownership of computers, etc., in that particular area in the New Tredegar, and the fact that we had, for example, libraries closed down where there was so there wasn't access there. And you did actually talk about mentioning, meeting families in the house.
Yeah.
But what other sort of means were there for people to actually gain support? I mean, obviously you can't be in somebody's house all the time meeting them.
No, we're lucky. We've got our fundamental basis is the midwifery and health visiting, and they have contact with all our families. What I would say is the early years website we've designed, and it, like I said, it's about to go live hopefully within the next month or so. But that is responsive, so it works on a mobile phone. One of the things we had to be really clear on is that whatever media we use is able to be used on a mobile phone. A lot of our families have mobile phones, difficult on data, but they do have mobiles. What we've also developed during this pandemic is for families who struggle. We've had families going through court, doing attend anywhere appointments with health. So we've developed a Chromebook with a MiFi unit. So it's a mobile Wi-Fi. And we've actually allowed families to loan them from us as a tablet, so they can actually do meetings, appointments, etc. And again, that's borough-wide. But our biggest thing is our single point of contact is our early years hub. So our family information service has changed to become the early years hub. They're based in Park of Ellen, down in Caerphilly Basin, next to Agwindi. But they have a main contact number, and everybody knows that number, and that's the number we're pushing out. And now we've used the new electronic system, so it hunts on the computers, which means even staff can work from home. They don't necessarily have to be in base. So actually technology has helped us to be more responsive to our families. But fundamentally, our teams are out in communities, in families' homes, in community centres, linking with everybody. So we're trying, I wouldn't say we've cracked it, but we're trying to get the word out there as much as possible. Plus, I'm very lucky that I link very closely with Tina and her team in Caerphilly Cares. So they link back to us, and Shelley in supporting people. So some of our most vulnerable families come through some of our wider partners to make sure that nobody really misses out.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So if somebody rings, or from the top of the valley rings that number in Caerphilly, there is a local response on the ground, is there?
Oh yeah. My team are there. To be fair, as managers, we man the building as well once a day. So there's already somebody, there's somebody in the building every day of the week. And our health visiting team is based there, and our parenting team is based there. So we can actually pull on people all the time. But there's 4 staff that man that number. So it is a central number, office hours, 9 till 5.
Okay, thanks. Talking about.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Adams, please.
Thank you, Chair. And as you said earlier, what a presentation. Sarah, you really knocked me out there. It's not something you practiced a lot, it's something you know. That came across so clearly. So thank you very much for being there and sharing that with us. You probably know we had a pre-meeting earlier. One of the questions I asked about getting online to do this, many of the families that you would have been working with may not have a full-size computer or a good-sized laptop, but so many of them, as you've already said, have a smartphone and can use that. And I made the point that isn't it much better for people to be going online and looking for information, and it's nice and it's wide enough for them to see much at a time rather than just on the phone, which can be a bit debilitating in doing what you need to do. So the fact that you've issued this Google Chrome and developed MiFi, and you're able to hand those around for people who need to look at all of that when you are not there, that's fantastic. So well done for that, and recognizing that that need to bring as much information in one hit and then get back to you. That really must have been a bit of a game changer for how you can see the information coming into you. So well done so much for that. And hopefully from some of the questions that other members ask, I may well come back to you. Thanks very much, Sarah.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Johnston, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Like the others, I really enjoyed that there. That was eye-opening as well. I just want to ask you a question on, because you said at the beginning that you brought Blaenau Gwent and Monmouth in, was it?
Blaenau Gwent and Newport were the first three, and then
Newport.
Monmouth and Torfaen have come on board now.
So have you seen any extra pressures to you or your staff, or were you able to employ more staff, you know, during this, since you had them there in? Because I know during COVID wouldn't have been the easiest time to employ people, you know. So you'd all this extra pressure. We maybe not as big a team as what you wanted. Did you find any pressures that way?
So what we've done is we've come together as the three local authorities, and then, like I said, Monmouthshire and Torfaen are kind of learning from it. And each of us have tested the same principles and the same model in each borough in a small area. So we've all had kind of different learning, and then we've come together as a steering group to work out what that looks like in all the communities. So we have had to employ extra staff, so health visitors, and that's been difficult. I've brought on, in fact, last year I was struggling to recruit family workers. So now what we've looked at, because there aren't sufficient family workers out there who've already had the training in the parenting programmes, we've designed, so part of it, what we did last year was design an entry role around early years support workers who have more flexibility. They sit under, in effect, the family worker, but we train them up as they come along. So they might be coming in from a different direction, still level 3 qualified, but then we can do the training on the job, as it were. And actually, that's been a game changer. And in fact, probably maybe a more important role. They've had a role around engaging families who've really struggled to engage with us. So instead of having a specific remit around delivering a parenting programme, they've had far more flexibility in building that relationship and then encouraging them in. And now what we're finding is they're almost like our key workers who are working alongside a family and bringing in the language worker, introducing others as they've needed to. So I suppose in the last year, we've grown a workforce, we've shaped a workforce. Welsh Government is looking now at this 2-year-old offer and how that looks. And we're using some of our learning to say, right, well, this is what we need to do if we're going to do this as a universal rollout. So actually, the learning around the workforce development is probably going to be critical in shaping future developments across the borough.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, because working as a bigger group where it's the same everywhere will be helpful, you know, to everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. Any other member have any points or questions, please? I'd like to pick
Chair, I did mention one at the end, sorry. And
yeah, can I carry on, please, Councillor Mann?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks again, Sarah. You did mention, I think it was on the last slide, measurable outcomes. And there's obviously a huge amount of work going on. I'm just wondering whether when you'll be able to get an indication of the difference you've actually made to people. You talked then about getting the suitably skilled staff. Well, for example, if you're able to provide employment for X number of people from the area, because I think people from the area working in the area are probably far more relevant than people coming in from outside.
Absolutely.
But when will you be able to sort of measure the difference you're making?
And I think you're right. We've got a logic model, and a lot of the logic model initially is around system change. So it is around staff morale, impact for families, local staff, local employment, bringing volunteers on. So that side of it, I suppose we can already put the data on that now. That side of it we're doing. That side of it is actually working. But what we want to look at now is data sets around, have we made an impact on population level indicators? So that's the data that we're really starting to look at, not just attendance and an individual journey for a child or a family. Now we need to try and scale that up. How do we capture that? As in, what's the starting point for school? How many children do we know their needs when they're going into school, when they start in nursery? Have we got the right support in place? Are we supporting that transition? Things like the PCP meeting for children with emergent developmental delays. Have we put those processes in place? How many children are getting support? So for us, it's now looking on a system level around whether we are putting sufficient in, that we have got less children going in with language issues. We know with COVID, there are more children with language developmental delays, more children that have babies that can't wave because they've never said goodbye to anybody. It's staggering. It's really the simple things that we never thought would be a problem, but actually humans are social creatures. And those are the things we're looking at now in that 0 to 3. So we're kind of expecting this massive demand. And over the next 2 years, for me, what will be the test is, does the demand drop, or were those children living outside of Flying Start areas hidden and now we know about them, in which case we need to make sure we've got the workforce to meet that demand. So I think it's those tests that we need to find now going forward.
So you will be able to report back in the future. Sorry, I couldn't think of helping when you talk thinking how to use a knife and fork.
Absolutely. It's really simple things.
When you said somebody who couldn't wave, I thought, well, blimey, that is so basic. You wouldn't believe that, really.
No, yeah.
But there we are. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. And you're right, Sarah. COVID has so profoundly affected families in different ways. Yeah. I think Councillor Sorales wants to come in, please.
Yes, just very quickly. I'm really delighted with that presentation. I think absolutely wonderful. The situation I'm always concerned about is how you get people who are extremely reluctant to be involved in organisations that provide support. In fact, they totally shy away from it. And often it's the case that those are sometimes the most needy.
Absolutely.
So have you got any specific ways in which you can find out where these people are? Because often they are totally shut off. And do not want to get involved.
Yeah, and funnily enough, this is where the early years support workers are really coming into their own. And I did it as a way to move them through into family support, but actually they're a role in their own. And this is where we've actually moved our mobile creche team. We're not delivering the same in-person programs that we used to. So our mobile creche team don't need to be delivering creches. So instead of doing that, we've used their skills of that engagement work with families to move them into early years support worker roles. And actually, we've got an example with a family where mum has got very low mood. When we were talking to her, it was because she was poor attendance at school, poor attendance in the childcare. There was a bit of haphazardness going wrong. She built a relationship with the early years worker who just basically said, how's it going? Is everything all right? It was a very low level conversation. And what she did was build that trust. We found out dad's got gambling issues. There's financial issues going on in the family. The landlord was going to throw them out. So all of a sudden, all of these root causes, the impact of why the children weren't in school and setting came out. But it took about 6 weeks for them to build that relationship first before she opened up. And then it's things like, right, well, we need to get a language worker in there because the children's language is poor. How can we build this? How do we build that support mechanism around her? And our early years worker is almost the glue. So she's that buddy to give the person confidence, that mum confidence to say, it's okay, we will bring the right people in to work with you to work through each issue, which one's the most important. So working through the landlord first, and it is about, they're known in the communities. So in Lansbury Park, everybody knows Tina. Tina is the family worker. She's very embedded in that community, and they all trust her. And that's what we're doing, is moving our teams into zones so that they build relationships in the communities, and then word of mouth goes around and they say, do you know what, if you phone so-and-so, they're really good and they'll help you. And then they don't actually see us as Caerphilly County Borough Council or health or anything else. They just see us as the support workers who work in that area. And that helps to overcome that that organisational issue. But also we have amazing links with the parent network, who are completely embedded in our communities. And you know, they are brilliant with the parent forum, and they will often help to do that hand holding where we've got parents who are very, very disconnected from the community and from us as an organisation, and they will build the trust first. So there's kind of a couple of ways that families get linked into us, but it's a work in progress. There's still going to be families that we'll probably miss, but it's trying to close those gaps as much as possible.
What is me? Sorry, Chair, could just come back for a moment. What is me is you know, getting to those children that are at risk.
Yeah.
Because I think children are at risk, are often children of parents who do not want to get involved, to avoid any embarrassment, and obviously to carry on with the sort of lifestyle that is not acceptable. If you understand what I mean, going down to the
no, I think you're right, but the community often knows them, so it's for the community to build the trust with us. And then we've had this again recently where we've got children who weren't in school, weren't in setting, and had been missed. And that's the only way to describe it. They were missed, and almost not. They weren't on our radar, even though they should have been. And actually, it was a community conversation that we went, hang on, this isn't right, and started building that relationship. And now all of a sudden, again, it's taken a bit of time for that worker to build that relationship. But now mum trusts her. The child is now in reception. The younger child is starting. We're looking at it at nursery. And then there's another one that we're looking at bringing them into childcare, and a baby. So there was 4 children potentially that had been missed. But it is about, the community does know where these families are. And that is about using that community social capital is amazing. You know, our communities are brilliant, but it's about how we help them to trust us so that we can help those who are most disconnected from us.
Yeah, it's the ones that become nomadic are the ones that worry me, that nobody ever catches up with. Yeah, but I think you're doing fine work, absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Councillor Sorrells. Anyone else, please? I think you've stunned us into silence, really, Sarah, with such a powerful presentation, and your responses too were comprehensive, and the contents were brilliant. So I'm really impressed. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Councillor Kirby, I mean, it's my guidance. I have got another technical question almost, that Gary Johnston will allow me to ask a second question.
Please proceed.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned there about landlords and about trouble in families with the rent being threatened with being evicted. Too many of our families, I'm sure, in private rental accommodation are in there without any kind of tenancy agreement and just end up paying by cash in a brown envelope in a doorway once a month. And they are very much at risk of any kind of action from an unscrupulous criminal, often landlord. I've heard that. Are you getting much of that kind of information when in your contacts?
We are getting
and
families.
If you are, is it then passed over to our private tenancy? That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah, we've got quite good links with both Caerphilly Cares, who obviously link with Sandra Isaac's team, and the housing team there. But we've also got excellent links with Supporting People, and we've actually got a POBL worker who rotates, so half a day a week on a Wednesday morning. They sit in our early years hub, But it's getting that information out to families. So where we have got a family that have had, like this family where she was threatened with eviction, the POBL worker then, we took her into the hub, arranged for a clean room session. The POBL worker could work with her and work through the finances and what the issues were and how she could get a solution to it. So I think as long as, again, it's about finding out about the families, and when they trust us, they'll ask us. And when they ask us for help, and in fairness, there are quite a few phoning into the early years hub. So we've got various kind of numbers on the wall of like our phone a friends that we can call on to kind of put the right support in place. But you're right, it is about, the partnership just doesn't stop with early years. It's so massive and so broad. We're collecting people all the time that can work alongside us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Adams, and thanks again, Sarah. Well, members, the recommendation in paragraph 3.1 of our report is that members note the progress made to date and comment on the planned priorities towards full implementation by 2024-25. We're looking forward to full implementation because you're doing a damn fine job, it seems to me, Sarah. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
We have noted the report, and we've welcomed the presentation from Sarah. Thank you very much again, Sarah. And we're going to move on to the next item. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And item 6 on our agenda is regional assessment of well-being, including local community area assessments. And as if by magic, here is Kath Peters, our Council's Corporate Policy Manager. Welcome, Kath. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's a tough one to follow, isn't it? There's, Sarah's done absolutely fantastic work here. So yeah, I'll do my best. We've got this agenda item for you today, which is around the regional assessment of wellbeing, and it's quite an important agenda item for yourselves because you are, as Partnership Scrutiny Committee, you are a statutory consultee on the assessment of wellbeing. So I've ably supported by some colleagues. If I just take members very briefly through the report to explain where we are in terms of the process in developing this next assessment, and then I've got Paul Cook with me, who's going to take you through. There were some quite chunky appendices to the report. So Paul has got a PowerPoint with your permission, Chair. I'll hand over to Paul when I've kind of explained to you where we are in the process at the moment. So
thank you.
What you had circulated was the executive summary of the consultation draft, and as elected members with Caerphilly as well, you would have had an email from, on behalf of the Gwent Public Services Board, hyperlinking you to the full assessment of wellbeing. And it's important at the moment, and that's the consultation draft, which will drive the next wellbeing plan. So just to illustrate that for you, the work that Sarah was describing, a best start in life, was an action area under the current wellbeing plan, and this local assessment of wellbeing as it is now, or the wellbeing assessment, is going to drive the wellbeing priorities and objectives for the next wellbeing plan. So it's kind of sort of the fundamental basis on which things like Sarah's work is delivered. And the next steps for us now is, on behalf of the Gwent Public Services Board, to take that forward into wellbeing planning over the next 12-month period. And it is something which runs with electoral timelines. So we have until the 5th of May to develop the local assessment of wellbeing. And then the next 12-month period, then working with the new administration across all of the partners, is to develop the wellbeing objectives. So this is the kind of where we are currently at the moment. The document itself is structured around the 4 pillars of wellbeing, so economic, social, environmental and cultural, and there's a lot of work going on across all the partners to deliver that. You will also see that as much as this is a regional document this time around, we still are developing local community area assessments. So we've got local community area assessments being delivered for Rumney, Mid-Valleys East, Mid-Valleys West, Isloyn and Caerphilly Basin. So we've divided the county borough up into those 5 community planning areas, and we were able to circulate the first of those to you. So you've seen the draft Rumney Valley area local assessment of wellbeing. What I would say is it's absolutely been a huge piece of work to be doing this regionally for the first time. It was far easier to do it just within the county borough area, because we're working across a huge number of partners, not just the 5 local authorities, police, fire, health, Natural Resources Wales and the Community Voluntary Councils, of which we got 2, Garvo in our area and Torfaen Voluntary Association in the Torfaen area. So it does take a little bit of time, and I think it would be fair to say that Caerphilly are leading on some of this work. So my colleague Paul is going to join you later as doing some of the sort of overview and pulling together all that work and making sure the document meets the statutory timelines. And as well as that, we are administering the Gwent Public Services Board and chairing a lot of the work. So for that reason, our community area assessments have taken a slightly back seat because we've been driving forward all the regional work to make sure it meets its timelines. So we've circulated the one for you for Rumley Valley, and I'm assured by officers that the remaining 4 will be available by very early next week. So my intention is to circulate that through those 5, through committee services to yourselves, with the request that any comments come back in by sort of mid-February, if that would be okay with yourselves, because as I said, we're furiously getting through them, and I understand there's only 1 left to be done of those, and it will be done by very early next week. The purposes of yourselves receiving this, as I said, is you are a statutory consultee. There are other statutory consultees as well, Welsh Government, the Future Generations Commissioner. Everybody's receiving this piece of work at the moment for their comments and views. And as I said, it's for the next 5-yearly cycle, so it's to deliver the next wellbeing plan. I think what is going to be key for us is, as much as it's been done on a regional basis and we're looking at regional data, we are looking at local data as well. So the wellbeing objectives may well be overarching, and we will have a set of Gwent regional wellbeing objectives, but that will translate down into local activity and local work, as we said. So Sarah's just given an example where a local project was expanded regionally because it was a good project, and we can probably see things like that transpiring through the new wellbeing plan, although we can't preclude at the moment what that's going to look like. So the assessment itself brings together a huge range of information data. We've also done a lot of engagement work with communities over the summer period last year. We're engaging now on the draft wellbeing assessment, and we will be doing engagement work over the summer period this year on the wellbeing plan and wellbeing objectives. The way in which we get to that is we call this at the moment the situational analysis. So this is all of the data and all the views we've had from communities. And then the next stage for us is to look at the response. So the response is then looking at what can public sector bodies and the voluntary sector bring to bear on issues which are arising, and how can they best direct all their partnership resources towards tackling those issues. So as I said, Best Start in Life arose out of this work from 2017, 2018, and we'll be doing the next thing around next time. I suppose I'm going to hand over to Paul very shortly to take you through some of the data. Obviously, we can take some questions at the end. But this agenda item very much links into your next agenda item as well on the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. Local area, apologies, their area plan is developed in very much the same way as the wellbeing plan, and they basically sit alongside each other. So you have one piece of legislation which is looking at the whole population and their wellbeing, and the Social Services and Wellbeing Act is looking at populations which require care and support. So they do align to each other, and we do work very closely with Phil and his colleagues in the Regional Partnership Board, and I can see Natasha Harris, one of the Partnership Development Managers, is in the meeting and will be supporting Phil. So to that end, we will run this as a single PowerPoint, if that's okay with yourselves, Chair, and we'll hand over to Phil at a pertinent point in time, because just to assure you, we are working across those 2 plans and with colleagues in the social care arena as well to make sure that they do align. I think probably at that point I'll hand over to my colleague Paul, and I will disappear because I'm going to run a PowerPoint in the background for both Phil and Paul, if that's okay.
Thank you, Kath. Hi, Paul.
Hi. Just wait for the presentation to come up.
There we go.
Thanks, Kath. Yeah, okay. So as Kath said, this is actually the draft wellbeing assessment. So I'm just going to run through the data and the findings. So we've been working on this for around a year. Perhaps I'll go on to the next slide, actually, Kath, and I can start going through the introduction part. Okay. Yeah, so as Kath said, this has been a huge piece of work across the whole of Gwent. First time we've done it like this. It has caused us some issues, and Kath talked about slight delays in some of the local assessments because we've been focusing on this. But my team is now managing this process now. I think we're getting back on track. So we're confident we'll hit our statutory deadlines and achieve that now that we're sort of running it. So yeah, so it's a huge piece of work. And this is only part of the process as well. So it says on the slide only the beginning. Unfortunately, it's not the beginning. We have been working on it for quite a while, but the assessment is at a stage now where it's out to consultation. So for statutory consultation, so members of the public and people can put their comments back in by the end of the month. So actually by Monday, but yourselves have got extension to 15th of February to include the local assessments as well. And then following on from that, we'll go through the so what, the response analysis, and it then needs to be published by the end of by the 5th of May. So I suppose the final bullet point there's also some areas that we're still working on. So there's a massive piece of work. It's probably, when it's going to be completed, be around 600 pages of data, which is a huge amount of information. There's still some we're trying to sort of work through and get into there, but by the final date for submission to Welsh Government, it will be ready on time then. So I say it will include the 5 community plan areas as well. Thanks, Kath. So yeah, so this for the first time it's across the whole of the 5 Gwent local authority areas. 5 very, very different areas as well, which also makes it challenging. So it's you'll see when we work through this that they are completely different. And what you will see, I think, coming through is the final bullet point, where there's quite a lot of inequalities across the county, the 5 counties, and that's come out very strongly in the data. And I'll run through the the slides on the individual chapters. So as Kath said, the assessment is structured around the 4 pillars of wellbeing. So it's social, economic, environmental, and cultural. And there's a chapter on each of those separately. So I think move on to the first one if we could, Kath. So just a slide to give you an idea of some of the overarching issues that have been coming through it. I mean, there's some good and some bad. So what's so good and not so good. So I think it identifies that you've got a very diverse economy, well placed to contribute to industries of the future. Rich cultural heritage has come through strongly, and strong communities have come through as well, particularly through COVID. We've identified how communities have really pulled together for looking after neighbours and each other. And a distinct and iconic natural environment has come through as a really sort of significant resource which people really value. On the not so good side, you will see there are significant health, education, housing, income and employment inequalities across the area. So some real pockets of deprivation in particular. And in terms of the environment, we have quite a lot of declining biodiversity as well, which is coming through strongly. Thanks, Kath. So the first element of social well-being is around deprivation, and you can see the map there. You can start to see the dark areas of deprivation, and the little box at the top kind of says it all really, in terms of that summarises the number and the percentage of LSOA areas that are in the most deprived 20% in Wales. So you can see in Blaen y Gwent, 45% of their LSOA areas are in the most deprived, and you compare that to Monmouthshire when it's 2. So straight away on the first slide, you can see some of the inequalities across there. One of the key things that this report has identified is that the most disadvantaged will be disproportionately affected by climate change as well. So we have areas of deprivation, and probably suggesting these areas are likely to get worse. The gap is going to get more. Thanks, Kath. So an area within social wellbeing is housing. Some really sort of deprived areas in centre of Newport and in some of our town centres. But if you look at the box on the top right, that gives you an idea of average house prices, and you see Monmouthshire, 312,000 the average house price. That's virtually twice the value, or twice the cost for house in Caerphilly, and 3 times that in Blaen y Gwent. So you can see some disparity in house prices. And if you look at the box below it, then in terms of income or gross pay, Monmouthshire 41,000, Caerphilly 31,000, and Blaen y Gwent 28,000. So these kind of disparities and inequalities across the region started to show up very clearly. And it identifies there that nearly 50,000 residential properties in Gwent are at risk of flooding. Not so many in Caerphilly as other areas, but certainly that's an issue coming across for the whole of Gwent. Thanks, Kath. So health, again, you can see the same geographic patterns starting to occur, and borne out by the data in the box above it. So significant health inequalities across Gwent. St James's, so the area around Lansbury Park in Caerphilly, is the most deprived LSOA in Gwent, 7th most in Wales. Very pleased to see it's 7th worst in Wales, because it was the first for a while. But Blaen y Gwent itself has the highest proportion of residents with long-term limited illness and the highest premature death rates. And I say overall, healthy life expectancy is very unequal across Gwent. Thanks, Kath. So social wellbeing, I probably won't dwell on this so much. The community safety, again, exactly the same patterns, same messages coming out. But overall crime increased between 2016 and 2019, but COVID has seen quite a significant reduction in crime, which is to be welcomed. Hopefully it doesn't go back after the pandemic has gone. Thanks, Kath. Education, again, the same patterns. Again, noticeable variations in attainment and qualification levels across Gwent. And probably picking up on what Sarah said in her presentation, I think the longer term impact of COVID on learning is yet to be determined, but likely to be quite significant potentially. So something we definitely need to keep an eye on. Thanks, Kath. Yeah, transport. So transport is quite interesting because it's actually the well, transport and access to services is the reverse pattern that we're seeing for the rest of Gwent. We know that good transport is crucial for economy, health, education, and leisure. But travelling by public transport is more difficult in the rural areas. So if you see in the little box at the bottom, the worst access to is Monmouthshire, where 39% of their LSOA is in the top 20% in Wales. Caerphilly only 5%. So yeah, so that's the access and transport is more of an issue within Monmouthshire and rural areas than it is in Caerphilly and some of our other areas. And while COVID lockdowns have increased working from home, we do need better digital infrastructure to support that as well. Thanks, Kath. I'll probably cover this one, income. This is a little bit more detail on that, but again, the same patterns are appearing across Gwent in terms of levels of income, and yeah, exactly the same. So perhaps move on, Kath, if you could. As with employment, same patterns. I suppose the key points to pick out in here is that the cost of childcare is a barrier to families and need more flexibility in work patterns. And once again, long-term impact of COVID is not yet known, but is likely to be significant. You need to keep an eye on that. Thanks, Kath. So the third chapter is the environmental well-being, and the first one is looking at habitats. So I think we know that Gwent has got some really distinctive landscapes, and that all contributes to well-being in a number of ways, which are listed there. The point in the second bullet point that 71% of our habitats are in unfavourable conditions, so and under stress. So something we certainly need to be aware of, and particularly the final bullet point, which competing demand for houses, particularly for housing, is causing habitat loss as well, which I'm sure we're all aware of. Thanks, Kath. You probably won't be surprised to find out the climate change and the risks associated with that are coming out very highly in this as being significant. So climate change, overuse, pollution, and crime is threatening our natural resources. As I talked about before, there's increased possibilities of flood, and on the other side, risk of drought and wildfires in the summer. An issue around the major impact it has on our agriculture and food production, particularly when 65% of Gwent is farmed. And then the bullet point on the top on the right, Brexit and potential changes to agricultural practices. This hasn't worked its way through yet, but we know that the effect of Brexit on beef and lamb and sheep prices is significant and may well have a big impact on our agricultural communities. Thanks, Kath. A linked one around ecological footprint in consumption. In terms of ecological footprint, if the rest of the world lived like we do in Wales, we'd need 3.3 planets to support us all, which is, well, there aren't 3.3 planets. You can see down below in the bottom right, Monmouthshire 3.4 and Caerphilly 3.1, but that's not something we can be complacent about. They were lower. It's still something we need to really focus on. Need to look at using resources more efficiently, reducing consumption and recycling if we can. While Gwent is above the Welsh average for recycling, the target to be zero waste by 2050 is going to be very, very challenging. We also need to look at food, energy and transport systems to reduce emissions as well. Thanks, Kath. And the final chapter is cultural well-being. I think the assessment identifies that there's quite a diverse cultural landscape in Gwent. But again, inequalities in communities make it harder for some to access cultural activities, increasing numbers of Welsh speakers. Fourth bullet point is quite a stark one. The effect of COVID on sport and culture has been particularly severe. You can see there that compared to 2019 figures, there's been a 52% reduction in full-time equivalent jobs, which is very, very significant. But believe that creative economy has great potential to increase contribution to the economy itself, but it might take years. If we're looking for a silver lining to this, the next bottom bullet point is that the ageing population may increase numbers of volunteers in this sector. So some positive there. The next slide then, please, Kath. So kind of summarising some of the key challenges and opportunities that the assessment has identified, I think these are the major ones coming out for us. The ageing population is significant. Resilience to climate change is important. The long-term impact of COVID needs to be borne in mind. We're not sure quite what that's going to be. There's an impact from leaving the EU. Decarbonisation of heat, power and transport is significant, as is energy security and food security. And with all of those, potential for widening in inequalities if we don't tackle them. Thanks, Kath. So the last couple of slides, the penultimate one is around the timetable. So where we are now towards the end of January, so the formal consultation, the public and statutory consultees ends on Monday. Yourselves as a committee have until the 15th of February to put your consultation comments in, which will be welcomed. Our role then is collating those responses and to get them sorted, because we have to take a draft of this to the PSB at the beginning of February. So the 10th of February will be the sign off of the wellbeing assessment by the PSB. That gives us a little while for proofing, translation, design before it's published formally by the deadline on the 5th of May. And as I said at the beginning, we now have a pretty good handle on this. So myself and my team are managing the process across Gwent, so we are pretty comfortable this is going to be achieved, what will be achieved. And then final slide then, please, Kath. So yeah, this is the final one. So basically it's kind of summarising what I've just said. The consultation, the public ends on the 31st of January. Individual member organisations are taking this through their governance, which is one of the reasons it's at scrutiny tonight. This is the same will be happening at the other local authorities and the other PSB partner organisations as well. And I suppose the final point, the final bullet point that's on the is now agreed the 14th of February. They're starting to look at the next stage, which is the so what. So we're looking at the key issues coming out and how do we start to deal with those moving forward to start producing the wellbeing plan, which will start when this finishes and will need to be complete by the 5th of May 2023. So that was that's my bit. Chair, I was perhaps going to hand over, unless you want questions on that, but hand over to Phil, who's got the RPB section.
Thank you. Phil next then, please.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. As Paul has highlighted, the Social Services and the Wellbeing Act and the Wellbeing and Future Generation Act have similar requirements for local authorities and health boards, and both require a population level assessment. And what we discovered quite early on amongst officers is that there's quite a bit of similarity and synergy to be gained. So it's a big thank you to Caerphilly. Actually, I've worked right across the 5 local authorities, and Caerphilly, Kath and colleagues, gave me an open door in terms of how we look to plan these sort of assessments together, because although there's slight differences, there's also a lot of similarities, and it does affect the same people. Wellbeing and Future Generations, obviously, in one sense, looking long term, but obviously Social Services and Wellbeing Act maybe picking up with some of the issues, current, such as winter planning, etc. So they're like two trains going down 2 different tracks, and what we've done is brought them on the one track. So I just want to acknowledge that Caerphilly officers have been great in developing that thinking across the region. Okay, if we just move on then, only 3 slides from myself. Just to highlight really how we fitted the PNA into the wellbeing assessment. In terms of the areas that we have to look at and sort of focus on, they're prescribed by Welsh Government. They set out the areas such as children, older people, carers, mental health and LD, and that will be reflected in the needs assessment. As Paul mentioned, 600 pages for wellbeing assessment. We could probably do something very similar, but what we've tried to do is make this a bit more meaningful. We've focused in on priorities which actually require partnership efforts across health, social care and the voluntary sector. Children looked after, that's a massive concern, not just for the health board, but also for local authorities in terms of the costs for some of the looked after children placed out of county. We know that in emergency crisis situations, it could be up to between £1,000 and £10,000 a week in the most extreme cases, and that's a huge strain on local authority budgets. So what we've been doing as an RPB is looking at how we work more effectively together. You can see from the graph the numbers are on the up, a lot more challenges, but there's a lot of work going on. In Caerphilly, for instance, they were very instrumental in implementing my service team, and so with Torvine, what we've been able to do through the RPB is look to ensure that that good practice is rolled out across the other 3 areas. But what we don't want to do to be doing as the 5 local authorities is paying out this massive amount of money to external providers in England. It could be in other parts of Wales, to support some of our most complex and challenged children. So we're looking to grow our sort of own support, but also accommodation solutions. And we've been looking at how we do that, because actually, if we're looking at accommodation solutions here in the region, the savings that we can make there can be reinvested into more preventative working as well, such as my service team. So that's just an example, and we've been using some of the ICF funding that's come through the RPB to develop a location in Newport, but also there are plans here in Caerphilly as well. Next slide, please. I think, where the population needs assessment, has to have meaningful, it needs to relate to everybody, carers. Every one of us at some point will take on some sort of caring responsibilities. I'd imagine there's quite a few people on the call here who already do that. Caring will affect us all, and we know if all unpaid carers in the community stopped caring tomorrow, there would be no society, because actually the amount of unpaid hours, the amount of support that unpaid carers provide is it's immeasurable, really. There are studies, but we are going to see a lot more people in the community going forward who will be providing in excess 50+ hours per week unpaid cares. Now that could be sons, daughters providing cares for elderly mums, dads, grandparents, etc. It could just be people in the community. So again, this is real for us all, and it's how we come together across health, social care, voluntary sector to support those carers. And again, it's looking at solutions, and we have a regional carers board to make life as easy as possible. That could be about GP appointments, it could be about respite solutions, but also not forget in terms of carers, we also have a young carers scheme as well. Okay, and just the final slide. Aging population has been highlighted, and I think let's just celebrate that for a moment. We are all living longer, which is hugely positive. It reflects on the huge efforts made across society, but also across all our organisations, health, social care. However, with an ageing population will come new challenges. Dementia, we are set to see an increase in the number of people living with dementia, and purely down to the fact that we are all living longer. But again, similar to carers, every one of us will be touched by dementia at some point. We will all know somebody, and again, I would imagine there's quite a few of us on the call who have direct experience of that. Law of averages just tells me that. So as a region, as not just as Caerphilly, Torvine and the Health Board, but the whole of Gwent, the whole of Wales, we have to come together. Is dementia a single health board issue? Is it a local authority issue? No, I'd say it's a community, society sort of approach that is required. And again, this will be a priority within the PNA. So all I was hoping to do today really was just to sort of give some context to how the PNA is aligned to the wellbeing assessment. We've sort of produced the documents alongside each other, used the same colour schemes, but avoided duplication. I have not included information within the PNA, which is within the wellbeing assessment. And I've said to Kath and colleagues, if the wellbeing assessment, if there's issues and people want information on carers, dementia, then signpost them to me, because I'll focus on that information and those areas, because that's what we're required to do through legislation, and that will save you as well. So a real synergy. But, you know, what does this all mean? Well, this P&A will highlight the need. And again, similar, we'll need an area plan, an action plan to deliver that, which is a lot more important than just the words on paper and on the screen in front of you. But what this does, this gives us a mandate to work together with the Health Board and the other local authorities on joint priorities. And I think there's some good traditions of working alongside our local authorities in this area. But what this does, it sets in legislation the fact, yes, we all need to get around the table. We need to combine, collaborate, pool our resources to have the maximum impact and effect on our sort of citizens. So just to say, Welsh Government legislation, we're all used to it. In their wisdom, they have set in place the need for the P&A to go through full council before the end of March. So part of the process for me to bring you here today is to bring in front of yourselves, hopefully for comments that will enhance this so that prior to full council sign off in March. Okay, I'll be quiet now and happy to take any questions alongside Paul and Kath.
Thank you, Phil, Paul and Kath. Kath, do you want to tie it all together before we go to comments, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As Phil said, all three of us are here to answer any questions. As we said, I'm just going to stop sharing, apologies. As we said, the P&A has always been done, the population needs assessment has always been done on a regional basis. We're now doing the wellbeing assessment on a regional basis, but as Phil said, the two documents will link. The next stage is quite key for us, the response analysis, as we talked about, where we have got to hone down on those key issues that can be tackled most effectively in partnership is where we are at the moment, and we will be very much working with Phil. So to use an example, if for example domestic abuse was coming up as a priority, then that could sit in either camp. So we'll make sure that we're not duplicating, that our services are being planned in the best way possible. Early years, likewise, the reports you see from Sarah, depending on the level of need within those families, there could be social care need as well. So we'll make sure that we plan properly, I guess, across the both of us. There is a slight difference in both pieces of legislation. As Phil said, the population needs assessment does need to go through council. The wellbeing assessment doesn't, but we will have to take the wellbeing plan through council next year to make sure members are fully cited on it. Quite a lot of data presented, but we're happy to take questions from you, and I will be through committee services circulating the local area assessments hopefully very early next week, and I believe Phil is willing to circulate the draft population needs assessment as well. Phil, is that right?
More than happy. In fact, I'd welcome your comments.
Yeah.
Council.
Yes, we'd all welcome sight of both, please, and hopefully we can get comments in by the deadline in February, is it? February?
Yeah, 15th of February, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Members are able.
Thank you very much, all three again. Members, who has questions? Any questions, please, for any of our three presenters today? Councillor Mike Adams, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 4 of Appendix 1 for this report, and at the bottom there, just next to the map of the upper Rumley Valley area, we have general comment about the numbers of medium and lower output areas, super output areas. So we have LSOAs and MSOAs. When we are talking to any of the people who've been looking at this this work and the outcomes that are talked about, what's the easiest way for me to tell someone who doesn't look at these kind of reports what an MSOA and an LSOA actually means for us to be able to grade them?
Yeah,
good question. Thank you, man.
It's a difficult one, isn't it, Councillor Adams? It is a statistical area. It's basically a statistical area which Welsh Government define. Medium super output area is obviously larger than a lower super output area. Lower super output areas don't necessarily correlate towards they're broadly similar, but they don't necessarily. You have things crossing ward boundaries. It is very, very difficult. It's a bounded area defined by the way in which data is gathered effectively, and that's the best way to describe it. What we have been able to do with the 5 community planning areas I referenced, Upper Rumney Valley, Mid Valleys East, Mid Valleys West, etc., we make sure there's no boundaries that cross over those. So when we talk about the Upper Rumney Valley, it is a group of medium super output areas, so we don't get those difficulties. I know colleagues in Newport are really grappling with that because they've got things crossing over boundary areas. We don't, and that's because officers many years ago were very clever in Caerphilly, and they made sure our community planning areas were coterminous.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's a difficult concept. You know, it doesn't even correlate to villages or towns.
That's right.
It is just it's a statistical geographical area that we grapple with.
Super output in just the SO part of that, is that an economic useful tool?
It covers a lot of data, as you would have seen from Paul. It covers everything from, you know, it's a measure of deprivation effectively, but you know, there's lots of determinants of deprivation. That could be economy, could be transport, could be health, education, crime figures. You know, there's a huge raft of data which goes together to determine deprivation levels, and you will see from Paul's tables what might be up in one area is down in another. So you would see the, you know, the bright colours on the far west of Gwent, and particularly the north of Torfaen, Gwent and Caerphilly, and you know, we all know that that's related to industrial heritage and industrial past in those areas. And then you've got Monmouthshire, you know, primarily historically rural, but then they've got issues with rurality. My words are all
rurality
and transport issues. You know, so it's just a way of looking at problems, but what it does help public service partners to do is understand where the worst issues are. So when they come to their planning, they can say, well, actually, yeah, we really do need to focus in this area, and the data backs it up.
Yeah, it's all about how small identifiable communities can cope.
Yeah,
in many ways.
So
thanks very much for your input as well, Phil. It's been a while since we've spoken. Nice to see you, and thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Councillor Adams. And a colleague mentioned earlier the St James Ward and Lansbury Park within there in particular, which, yes, it's absolutely great that it's dropped down the league table so far as deprivation goes. But these sorts of areas are very valuable in targeting particular areas within Lansbury or within Councillor Cuss's ward in Upper Rumney Valley for support.
That's right, yeah. Thanks all.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think what we've heard confirms what a lot of us knew in the first place, that the difference between Monmouthshire and most other places. I was intrigued with some of the maps you put up, Phil. There was somewhere in the middle right-hand side of Monmouthshire which was featuring sort of badly, and I haven't got a clue where it was, but there was a bit of colour there right on the side. But you know, that's not important for this thing. But it was just strange where there was that one little bit which was sort of down. But and the other thing I noticed was the again, Monmouthshire actually was at the worst end of the table with dementia, compared with Blaenau Gwent, for example, whereas normally the other way around. And I assume that is maybe because of the people living longer in one part rather than another. I don't know if that is the case or not. It's I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that, Chair, before I go on to another one.
Anyone like to come back on that, please?
Just to say, obviously there's the average age of the citizen in Monmouthshire is a little bit older than other local authorities, and that's obviously going to reflect in the number of people predicted to be living with dementia.
Oh, sorry, that was a prediction, Phil, was it, rather than?
Yes. It's sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I within the PNA, obviously you'll be able to see a lot more details, but yeah, those graphs are predictions right up to 2040. But we will have information on the current number of people living with dementia as well.
I managed to miss the fact it was a prediction. Sorry.
No, I didn't explain it, so you didn't miss it. Sorry.
Thank you both. Kath, please.
Yeah, I think the area you're talking about in the Monmouthshire map, Councillor Mann, is actually around Abergavenny, because I was quite interested in that myself and thinking, why is that area there? And I think there are some quite large council estates around the Abergavenny area, so I suspect that's where some of the data is coming from. And I think in respect of life expectancy, you are right, there is a significant difference in life expectancy across the area, so that might be having a contextual sort of effect on dementia, but it's probably also a consequence. There's younger families within the sort of West of Gwent in comparison to the family age group and family makeup within the Monmouthshire area. And I aspire to retire to leafy Monmouthshire. I keep saying that. Yeah, I never get there. But,
yeah, parts of Abergavenny sometimes feature in police discussions. So there we are. And sorry, could I go back to what Mike said for a minute, Chair? I think there's a case with some of the reports to get a glossary on them, because it would be, it's not just those that Mike mentioned, there are other things there as well. But if I could go to page 44, which is, I don't know, appendix something or the other, I was intrigued on 3.3. It says access to services and crime. Now, a lot of these appendices are very useful and they got good information, but I was wondering why we're linking services and crime. It seems a bit of an odd one, really.
Councillor, I'll just try to find that page.
It's also dismaying to see how few banks and post offices are in that area. But that's another.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's a good point. I can check that with the officer who's been drafting the local area assessments. Paul, we can do that, can't we? It's one of our staff who's pulled that together. I can find out why that is, but it could be a consequence of the way the data comes in from Welsh Government. But if I can get back to you on that, Councillor Mann, after the meeting, as to why the linkage is there between those two, would that be okay?
It just seemed to be an odd link somehow.
Yeah.
But there we are.
I'm sure there's a sensible explanation which Kath can hopefully unearth for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the other one, Chair, is what we raised in the previous thing, is about measurable outcomes. You know, when are we going to be in a situation to see what? I mean, there's a huge amount of work going on here.
Yes.
And you know, but really, we need an idea of what's coming out of it, don't we? Yeah.
Shall I pick up on that, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it is. It's a very difficult one, and we're only at the end of the first 5-year cycle of these plans. A lot of the stuff that we are working on is long-term population outcome level things. You know, just listening to Sarah talking about early years, you know, that kind of input into a child's life is not going to reflect in their data around their education and employment, and you know whether they're affected by crime for 20-25 years. So there's always the argument that when we talk about future generations, they talk about 25-year time frame. Now the data doesn't change very much year on year. We do our best to sort of look at data, but very much a lot of our reporting and analysis is qualitative. So you would ordinarily see a 6-month update report is coming as an information item to you this evening, just because of the volume of reports on the agenda this evening. It tends to be a narrative update because tracking of population indicators over a short period of time doesn't really show very much. There is a set of national indicators which Welsh Government track around wellbeing, and you know we keep an eye on those as well. But it is something I think that we've probably struggled with as a Caerphilly Public Services Board about where we show the difference. It is difficult, and it's something I think the Gwent Public Services Board is going to have to get to grips with. But I'm not sure if Phil's got any input on data from the RPB side of things and how you track progress.
Again, a similar position to yourselves, Kath, but there's also quite a bit of work going on at national level. There's a national outcomes framework being developed for social services, reviewed a wellbeing outcome framework. And again, I just think this all needs to be brought together. Why would we look at an outcomes framework for social services? I think it needs to be with yourselves, the PSBs and the RPB coming together, because they're the same people. But I think it needs to be more than just quantitative. It needs to be qualitative case studies as well. So we've got examples of that. We've you know, in terms of some of the funding that we've administered across the region, we've ensured that it is that sort of breadth of sort of outcomes are captured in terms of numbers, but also people's real life experiences, etc. But I think that that's the most important thing going forward. We've got to be able to demonstrate, we're having that impact. And, again, with the area plan and the wellbeing plan, I think that's an opportunity for us to do that jointly as well.
Okay, thanks all. Dagmar.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Thank you, Kath. Councillor Cuss, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just got two questions. One is on the obviously the deprivation figures for the Upper Rhymney Valley. I'm fully aware of them, obviously living in the Upper Rhymney Valley. But obviously this is just the assessment stage, and then once all that's been agreed, it will go to the full plan stage. I'm just wondering how much of a, because obviously some of the figures that are quoted in the Upper Rhymney Valley are quite worrying, really. And for me, living in that community, we really need this plan that is created to be very beneficial to the residents who live up in those areas. So, when it goes to the planning stage, how are we going to tackle some of those, or, just give an example if you want, Kath, how are we going to tackle some of those issues that are in that report to make sure that, people like myself and residents who are living up in the Upper Rhymney Valley can have confidence that we are taking these stats pretty seriously and this plan will be effective. My second question is about the boundary review. Obviously, wards have changed in certain areas in the county borough, and I'm just wondering how these stats will affect your report, Kath, after the election, because my ward, for instance, which is obviously the first most deprived ward in the borough and 8th in Wales, how is that going to affect? Because obviously I'm going to be incorporating the town centre, obviously, if I get elected in May. But, have you done an analysis of the boundary review with these stats? Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks,
take that question first, Councillor Cass. In relation to the change in electoral boundaries, they will not affect the MSOA and LSAO data, bounded data. So, in effect, there won't be any effect on the data. It's a different geography. So the ward boundaries are a different geography, and even when the ward boundaries change, they won't affect the LSOA and MSOA data. The first part of your question about how will it be sort of meaningful and effective for communities, I think that is really important, because what we will need to be doing over the summer period, and we're hoping, please, that we can do this face to face in communities and go out and talk to them about what the priorities are looking like in their area, and whether they test with them whether they feel those priorities are the right things for the Public Services Board to be working on. We were able to do that last time round. We were able to, go out and do community events and set ourselves up in libraries and community centres. And I think a lot of you as elected members would have come along to those things as well. We ask a set of questions to communities. This is what the data's saying. Does this mean anything to you? Is the priorities that we're thinking about right? Should there be something else which is delivered? So we need to do that. I'm hoping we can do that over the summer period face to face. We really struggled with engagement last summer because we couldn't do that. How do we make sure it's effective? The response analysis which Paul talked about is about funneling down all of these. We might end up with 50, 60 lists of priority issues, which have got to be funneled down into the areas which partners can make the most difference on. So we are looking to agree with the Public Services Board a prioritisation scoring system, which we used last time. And it's looking at things, is it long term, is it preventative? Is it something partners can work on together? Is it going to make the most difference for future generations? It's those kind of questions we talked to get from there down to the 8, 9, 10, whatever it turns out to be priority areas. So, for example, referring back to Sarah again, best start in life scored last time, in that we really need to make sure that young people are growing up with the best environment and the best services. What you've chosen to look at your next meeting now, jobs, growth and employability support, which is something which came out as a consequence of COVID. Those topic areas get selected because they are the ones which make the most difference. Then what falls out of those would be the action plans and the projects which fall out of those priorities. So we're going through that process now at the moment. So we would hope that, looking at those really brightly coloured areas of the map, there are going to be some wellbeing objectives around that and potentially some action areas around that. We can't prejudge what it's going to look like at the moment, but I know both Paul and I are thinking that inequality is highly likely to come out as one of the focus areas for the Public Services Board, because you just see that inequality across Gwent hugely. But we do know that our delivery partners are in the local authority boundaries. It isn't there isn't a Gwent team that's going to go out there and solve economic deprivation. It will come down to local projects and local delivery. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Kath. Councillor Kirst, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I was just going to, if I may have one more question. It's nice to see you, Phil Diamond. I've seen you for a while.
Likewise, Councillor Cass, how are you?
Yes, very good. Just on the regional partnership board, I'm just wondering, because obviously I think a lot of things have just been distracted because of COVID, and everything's focused on that at the moment. Hopefully we're coming to normal times. I'm laughing, but hopefully we are coming to normal times. I'm just wondering whether the agenda of, merging services, combining services as a region is still a thing, because obviously I know it was discussed quite a lot before COVID, and how we can merge services. You mentioned about our placements with looked after children and things like that, which is, bankrupts authorities in certain cases. So I'm just wondering whether, that agenda is still there, and what type of services we are looking to, pool together and work together on.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I knew you'd come up with a good question. So obviously, yeah, thank you. And I'd like to think that the PNA is in the second PNA is in a good place, and it reflects well, obviously, for your input. Obviously, being involved in the RPB previously, and I would always say you were always sort of astute, but also focused on the citizen. So that hopefully comes through in the PNA as well. But again, as soon as you said it, I said I should have mentioned that COVID, impact of COVID, long COVID, etc. That's a huge feature within the population needs assessment as well. And again, we talked about obviously looked after children, dementia, that will come through the PNA as well. So, thanks for bringing that. Gives me an opportunity to respond. The integration of services, yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking back to the safeguarding hubs around the children's and the adult services, where we have police officers now sitting alongside social services, social workers, health visitors, which is something that Sarah picked up on her first presentation. Yeah, it's still on the agenda. In terms of dementia, we have reablement services where we have health colleagues working alongside social work colleagues, and actually a bit like Sarah and the flying staff, they're not seen as health or social care, they're just seen as support workers. So definitely another key area. Some of the work we've done around the care homes during COVID in terms of the environmental health officers working alongside health, again, public health and social workers. But I think where this is really coming to the fore is around our hospitals. It's newsworthy every day. Ambulances stacked outside hospitals. So where health and social care are looking for that integrated approach is around hospital discharge, looking at how we can help people move back into the community a lot more timely. What we're looking at the moment is almost a double-handed approach, as we have the social worker sat alongside the nurse on the ward, because nurses in the ward, they will not have the same amount of information and local knowledge on what services are available in the community, because let's be honest, their job is there to support that person in that hospital. So by bringing the social worker in alongside the consultants and the GPs, they can say, actually, no, this person can come out of hospital. We've got some support services, whether it's Age Connect, whether it's Alzheimer's Society, whether it's our own reablement teams that can bring that together. So lots of key areas, but I would say that was definitely a feature. And again, that's an opportunity as well to bring in the voluntary sector as well in terms of the support. I think we're all going to eventually end up moving in that direction because of I know funding seems aplenty at the moment, but there's going to come a point where we have to pay off for all the PPE that we've had through local authorities, etc. So streamlining services, I think it's just par for the course going forward.
Yeah, No, it's good to hear that it's still on the agenda, Phil, because what I was worried about with COVID was all the good work that you were all doing was going to be tossed aside, and it's all going to be focused on COVID. So it's good to hear that, and it's nice to see you again, Phil.
Yeah, and I know it's something you championed very highly at the RPB, and I'd like to think that some of us continue. Still have our little challenges with the health board, as you know.
I can imagine, yes.
But no,
we won't go there.
No. We're all sat around the table still, so it's pretty good. But yeah, of course, you have different organisations.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Councillor Cuss. Any other member have any other question now, please? Okay, thanks once again to Kath, Paul and Phil for their fine presentations. We really did appreciate it. I'll go to the recommendations on the report now. Paragraph 3.1 of the report recommendations that our committee note the wellbeing assessment and associated community area assessments and provide any comments. Comments have been provided, thank you. This we've done. The further recommendation, which Kath and colleagues have alluded to earlier at paragraph 3.2, is that given the size of the document, members be given more time up to the 15th of February to provide any comments. Kath has undertaken to forward documentation to us. Thank you for that, Kath. So I'd encourage all members to consider any further comments they'd like to share and make sure we get our comments back by the deadline in mid-Feb. Thank you very much again, colleagues. We move on. Item 7 we've just covered. Thank you, Phil. So on to item where are we now? At item 8, sorry, Caerphilly Public Services Report 2020-21, and that's back to Kath again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is just an annual report I keep saying it's the former Caerphilly Public Services Board, but it still acts in a residual capacity until 2023 when we have a new Gwent Wellbeing Plan. So we are still reporting on all the action and activity under the existing 8 action areas as they are now and enablers, and your usual sort of 6-month update report which you receive is combined into an annual report. So the annual report for this cycle ran from October 2020 to September 2021 because of COVID knocking us on a little bit effectively. So we're in that situation where we pushed our annual report. Welsh Government were content with that. It was agreed virtually by the residual Caerphilly Public Services Board in November, and I'm pretty sure we circulated it to members at that point in time, but just wanted to put it on the agenda for you this evening, just to see that it is there for you, just to inform you that it has been done. It will be a situation that this current wellbeing plan runs until 2023. However, this will be the last annual report of the Caerphilly Public Services Board because we're in a situation from May this year after the election where we are starting on the wellbeing plan for the Gwent regional wellbeing plan. Then we will not be doing an annual report for Caerphilly. So this will be the last annual report under the Caerphilly Public Services Board, but you will still continue to see the 6 monthly updates. So you will still see those up until January 2023, which will be kind of the last meeting when you are scrutinising the wellbeing plan. So as I said, slightly delayed. The report is there appended. And can I just apologise to members for section 5.1 of the report? I've reviewing the papers before this evening and I've realised I've just copied and pasted something which comes in from our guidance document, and I'm very sorry. There isn't anything other than the attachment. So obviously you can see that there's an update there against each of the areas. I'm happy to take any questions. I'm hoping my colleague Paul is still on the call, but if not, I'll do my best to answer.
Thank you for that, Kath. Councillor Johnston, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, well, it's a bit of a point, but there is a question there as well. Now, I think we would all agree the best way out of deprivation is well-paid jobs. Can you tell me what work is being done with the city deal that is bringing these well-paid jobs to our areas? Because at present, I haven't seen anything. And it's been, what, 7-8 years now since the city deal's been running?
I'm not sure it's really Kath's area to comment on the city deal, but you're welcome to make a comment if you'd like.
Well, it is bringing jobs to the area, Chair, isn't it? You know?
It is, but that's not what we're considering today. Anyway, Kath, if you'd like to respond, please do.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You are right. The city deal isn't kind of within the purview of delivery of the Public Services Board. It's probably something that's better answered by our head of regeneration than it is by myself. This, as much as we got jobs growth and employability support in there, that it isn't really looking at the city deal work. That's kind of held somewhere else. So, sorry, Councillor Johnson, I'm not able to answer that, and it's probably best directed to Head of Regeneration or Mark S. Williams as Director, I would suggest, rather than myself. Apologies, I can't answer that question.
No, you don't need to apologise, Kathy. It's not really your remit. It's certainly worthwhile. It's a valid question, and I support it, Councillor Johnson. I would suggest that Committee Services forward your query to Mark S. Williams on our committee's behalf and seek a response if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Anything else, please, colleagues? No one else? Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation, Kath. Let's go to the recommendation. Paragraph 3.1 of this report, and it's that members note the contents of the report made by the Caerphilly Public Services Board on its progress. So we've duly noted it, and we give thanks to all who contributed to the board's important work. It is much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. That's the end of our agenda. So without further ado, I'll ask the recording to stop and end the meeting. Thank you.